This presentation will help you write your research paper, which we also call the article. Notice the length, 8 to 12 pages. That gives you a good range, so please stay within that range. The illustrations don't count. The 8 to 12 pages is of lines of writing. This is worth 400 points, which is the equivalent of 40% of the grade. So I'm going to go through this PowerPoint very thoroughly. As usual, rough drafts are not graded, and they are due on Sunday, week 5. And then you turn in your 400-point final version due Sunday, week 6. Now, the business case scenario is basically the same as for weeks 3 and 4, with the exception that now Robert Warner has approved your proposal. So you know that you're graduating, you just completed your master's degree, you're looking for a job in your field now. Not scholarly publishing, at least not with Parker Benson. To emphasize your writing skills, you'll publish this article. It's very difficult to get articles published, so you're going to start with the people who know you. Robert Warner at Parker Benson. Now, the most important part of this project is always choosing a topic that you can make a connection with. Okay, so I've got a long list here. I'm not going to read them all to you, but I will point out a few things. A lot of people like the work-life balance in a specific industry or a situation. That's always a popular choice. Accounting majors sometimes like to zero in on an IRS law, IRS tax law, and how would you change it? Why doesn't it work? How could you improve it? That sort of thing. Another very popular one is the female military personnel engaging in combat. There's a huge red flag here, though. If you are so passionately devoted to only one side, there's no way this can work the other way. Your writing may tend to be inflammatory. You may want to choose something else. Another one that's popular with the healthcare people is these HIPAA violations with the electronic submission of medical records. Here in Michigan, that's been a very popular point for the advertisements on television. So there's a lot of interest in that. Another one that is very, very popular is this idea of helping military retirees transition into civilian jobs. Now, I just want to take this topic to show you how you can look at this as an opportunity or a problem or both. Some papers are strictly devoted to this is great and this is what the retirees need to do so that they maximize their chance of getting the best job in the civilian workplace. Other people like to take this topic and say it's a problem. Here's why retirees aren't getting jobs. And then, of course, in recommendations, they show how to fix that. But the body of the paper is more toward this is a huge problem in our society. So you can see how the same topic could go one way or the other. And I'll tell you, another one that's kind of popular with people is the comparing PayPal with Apple Pay or another payment method in deciding based on specific criteria why one works better than the other. And I have had nice reports too on this TSA security at a specific airport. Cybersecurity, people tend to like that one as well, but they also like the one about decreasing identity theft in a specific industry or hypothetical corporation. And some of the people we'll sort of morph this topic into being more about how to fight terrorism. I'm sorry, terrorism. You don't want to fight the patriots. I was just looking at relocating expatriates in a specific industry. Sometimes when people are living in exciting places like Guam or Japan, they like to choose this one and show the different multicultural customs and how in one way it works in our nation, but do the same thing over there, and it's a huge problem. So that can be popular. And then also, the marketing majors often like to go to perfecting social media as a marketing technique, showing how it works, showing how it doesn't. And sometimes the business administration majors like that one about analyzing why an entrepreneurial corporation failed. So those are just, some of the topic choices. Notice in red it says, if these options don't work for you, email me with other topic choices. Because as I started out by saying with this slide, the key here is to find a topic that means something to you so that you're not just reading books and articles and saying, I don't know why I'm doing this. So, look at the list. If you don't see one that interests you, we'll work it out. Now, formatting guidelines, by this time, I'm sure you know how to set up a memo. Remember, you can make your document look better by using something other than memorandum at the top. Use Parker Benson Publishing and put it in color. Make it a little larger. Do a little graphic design. Make sure that design is positioned correctly, logically, and sized correctly if you do that. Okay, here's the requirements. 8 to 12 pages. I gave you a huge range here, so please stay within it. Size 12 times New Roman is the easiest to read, so that's the one that should be used. The graphics, the same thing about the letterhead. Sources. This comes from the composition department. They like to see 5 to 8 sources for a paper of this size, and they want 3 from the UMUC library just to be sure students know how to use it. Now, if for some reason you can't find the right sources in the library, email me. But work with those UMUC librarians. I've been in presentations where they just are so enthusiastic about helping the students. The librarian is really the student's best friend. So try to get their help. Line spacing, same as usual. Single space within the paragraph and skip a space between paragraphs. Now, obviously, you're going to want headings in the major report, but the transmittal memo is going to be very brief, 2 brief paragraphs. No extra information, please, so you don't need the headings there. The components, transmittal memo, title page, executive summary, report, references page. You may have appendices, like a glossary, and your illustrations may be at the back if you didn't fit them into the report logically. But one thing I want to point out, in weeks 1 and 2, I had you study abstracts, which is a brief, very brief overview of the entire report for a technical audience. Executive summary is more for the managerial audience, and it's an entire overview of the entire report, kind of like a snapshot. It is longer than the abstract, okay? Now, illustrations. They are required. Oh, one thing about that executive summary. Everything listed here is on a new page. You can use a section break. You need to start a new page. I need to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different components that each start with a new page. Illustrations are required this time, but don't include them in the page count. You have to have 8 to 12 pages of writing. The writing can include the references page. Okay, let's talk about the structure. There's 6 sections. Start with your transmittal memo and end with your references page, or you may have some appendices at the end as well. What do we do in section 1? Here is our front matter. That's what it's called, and it's separate pages, as I have emphasized. I hate to be overbearing about that and repetitive, but that's one thing where students tend to fall down. And not everyone submits a rough draft, so I kind of have to hit it heavily here. Very brief. Notice that's in red, it's underlined, it's bolded. Brief transmittal memo to state the name of the article that is attached and move the project forward. You need 2 paragraphs here. What are you attaching? And what is your next steps? Are you going to have a Skype conference? Are you going to call? How are you going to follow up? How are you going to make sure this does not get lost on a busy acquisition editor's desk? Okay, that's it. 2 brief paragraphs. Title page, formatted in APA. You studied APA intensely in week 1 and 2. You'll see from your source, maybe you used Purdue, maybe you used UMUC, maybe you used the actual APA paper copy of the book, but you had some sort of reference that you chose as your favorite, and it would include the title page format, a sample of it. So go back to that. Executive summary, we talked about it, a brief overview of the entire report. It's usually about 3/4 of a page for this size. You just want to get something from each section. So let's move on to those sections. Now, section 2 is the introduction. You have to state the problem and or the opportunity. It could be both. I used that military transferring into civilian work topic because it is so popular. And I showed how maybe you want to take it as an opportunity. This is a great, time in your life. You've served your nation, and now you'll be rewarded by using the experience you learned from serving your nation and getting a great job in the civilian workplace. That's an ideal scenario. But maybe you're more interested in those, those people who it isn't as smooth as that. There's problems along the way. And maybe that's how you want to focus. Notice it says and or. If you're dealing with problems, at the end, you have to show how you intend to solve them. So you can go from the beginning with it as a problem or an opportunity, but end up with some recommendations, and that'll be further in this presentation. Okay, the scope, establishing boundaries and limitations for your article. What are you leaving out and why? Let's stay with that military transfer topic. Maybe you're only going to do the Navy. You're not going to try to do this for all, retirees. Or maybe you're going to limit it even more with people who had to leave the Navy before they expected to. There's going to be some ways that you take a huge topic and narrow it down. So think about it, and in your introduction, show you're thinking about that. Let the reader know not to expect certain things. And then you need appropriate background information. That's quite often historical data, relevant laws, definitions, things like that. Don't tell people what's the obvious thing. Don't write as a student who wants to, pack everything in and show in 5 different ways that 5 different people are saying the same thing about something that we all knew in the beginning anyway, okay? I mentioned definitions. Don't define simple words that we already know. Okay, creating a structure. Your research methods. This one is pretty simple actually, because you're going to show which approach you chose to research your project. You're going to show some limitations here. You can only use secondary sources and your own inspections, basically. Why? because of what I have written about previously. There's something called an Institutional Review Bureau. It's managed by the federal government, and you have to fill out a lot of paperwork before you can do research, academic research. I know that, we break this rule all the time in college, but we've got sensitive topics here, and there's certain types of things that the government especially is concerned about. And one is workplace research, because you don't want someone's job being jeopardized. I know all about this because I did a very complex a project for my PhD. I actually combined medicine and workplace and elderly patients by researching the way a home health care agency learned to write as business professionals rather than nurses. So I had all kinds of red flags. I was able to get the approval to do this research, but it takes a lot of writing, a lot of filling out forms. So I just advise my students, stay with your secondary sources and your own inspections. Okay, you can look at things, you can look at the secondary sources and make some judgments about what they're writing, but you can't interview your boss about some sensitive topic, because what if someone else is overhearing your boss, his boss or her boss, and he doesn't like or she doesn't like what is being said? You can see why the federal government is protecting you. Okay, we go on to section 4 of 6 sections. This is the one that's the longest part. First, you write about what the experts think, the opinions and the facts from their research study. Then you draw your own conclusions from the experts' opinions and facts. Okay, now you have to have some criteria for drawing these conclusions. Why are you doing this? Why are you saying you think this because somebody said that? You have to evaluate your options and your alternatives. Okay, so I'm thinking just, off the top of my head here, but let's say you were going to write a report that would not be appropriate in this class, whether it's better to lease a car or buy it. You could research the opinions of Car and Driver magazine and JD Power, all of that. Then you would draw your conclusions. Maybe they're saying um, it's better to buy the car. Now, what would be your criteria for that? You'd have to have narrowed that topic, and it'd have to be, well, this is a family that lives in the suburbs, but the wage earner works in the city. So your criteria might be the miles. Okay, do you see where I'm coming from? You have to have reasons for thinking the way you do, support your claims. This will be the major section of the report. Okay, now here's your section 5. We're getting close to wrapping this up. Here's where you have a brief restatement of the problem and or opportunity. We know what you've been writing about. Please don't, go back over the whole thing. A couple sentences will do it. Then your recommendations and your predictions. And this will be a heavy section. This will also be lengthy. You reported what the experts said. You drew conclusions about their data. Are they correct? Are they not? And why? That was my example with it'll be the miles for the leasing versus buying that makes you say, okay, buy the car. So you need to do the same thing. You have to have some criteria here. And then we finish up with the back matter, your reference page. Glossary if there are special terms. Say you're writing about the rifles. You're going to need a glossary for that probably. A few things you want to point out. And then there could be other appendices, as you need them. And illustrations, if you didn't position them in the body of the report, you'll need them at the end because they are a requirement. It's better to weave them into the body of the report. Illustrations, photos, charts, graphs, a logo counts. Don't just think of photos or don't just think of charts or graphs. There can be all kinds of illustrations. And you've seen this slide before. Choose easily understood words. I'm not saying you can't be eloquent, but if the reader is focusing more on your eloquent writing style and running to get the Oxford English Dictionary, you aren't putting enough priority on the content. That's what we want in the real world. That's what we want in the workplace. We want to get the ideas. And we have to remember that not everyone is dealing with English as what they learned as a baby. Okay, so we want everyone to understand. And of course, grammar, spelling, typographical errors, you got to make this correct. This is the 40% of your grade. And plagiarism, cite your sources according to the APA guidelines. Check them if you used a citation machine. I'm going to put everything through turnitin.com and that will detect plagiarism. Now, what do I mean by the citation machine? That's when you click on something and it gives you the citation. A lot of times, depending on what you're using, it's wrong. Bill Gates can put whatever he wants in Microsoft because he's Bill Gates. But the APA, American Psychological Association, owns APA and they have certain rules. And also, remember, we've talked about indirect sources. So you're not going to pick that up if you just use a citation machine. So stop and think. Go back to weeks 1 and 2 and think about what you learned. And then you've seen this before. No unnecessary words, please. And don't write as a student. Write this as if it were to be published in a scholarly publication for this field. And don't plagiarize. Good luck with this report. Remember to do your rough draft and submit it on time.